Welcome to the Sandwich Generation Survival Guide. I am your host, Candace Dellacona, and I am thrilled today to be joined by writer Beth Pinsker. Beth is a certified financial planner and a columnist at MarketWatch, which is actually how Beth and I met. Most recently, though, and importantly, Beth wrote a book called My Mother's Money that was released just last month to great fanfare. Welcome, Beth.
So nice to be here. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us. As I mentioned, you and I met. I think I was a source for one of your articles. I think there are so many people who look to you as a thought leader in the space of personal finance. But before we get there, I know you had a bit of a roundabout way finding yourself in this area of being what I think is an expert in sort of the aging retirement money space. So, can you give us the inside scoop of how you landed in this very specific niche, Beth?
Yeah, no, it doesn't make sense to me or anybody else. I started out as a film critic, so I have really no rational way of explaining how I ended up being an expert in this particular subject matter. I just know I got more serious about my reporting subject matter as I went along, and I ended up at Reuters as a retirement columnist. And that is when the CFP became available to me, and I took the coursework and I got my CFP designation after passing the test. And I just sort of dove in head first to all the subject matter. I just really liked it and engaged with it. And when it came time to take care of my mom, I knew all of these things that were book learning. And it turns out that when you have to take care of somebody in your life who's ill, it takes more street smarts than it does book learning. And so I wanted to be able to help people through that, given that the financial knowledge that I have and the way that the back end of the systems work. I was sort of able to explain it to people in real human terms how to get through the rest of this stuff that nobody ever talks about and nobody ever has an instruction manual for.
Yeah, I love that. And what you kind of glossed over, which I think you should be bragging a bit more, is to become an expert in your field as a writer, you took the CFP, which is the Certified Financial Planning Exam Series, which, for those of you who don't know, is no easy feat. So, kudos to you, Beth, for really taking on that role and kind of diving in head first to become extremely educated in this area because it is so vast. And one of the things that you just said that I think is so true for all of our listeners and all of us in the sandwich generation is that there is no guide, there is no manual. And what I hope with this podcast is to provide people a survival guide. And that's why we have experts like you. So, talk to me a little about making the jump from a CBS Market Watch columnist to actually putting the pieces together as an author and the overview of the book, how that process started for you.
It really started with my column because I had just started at MarketWatch when my mom had her surgery. So I started at MarketWatch in like September of 2022, and my mom's surgery was in November of that year. And so I was really brand new to this job. I had been at Reuters for many years before. I had been various other places doing personal finance journalism, but I was new to MarketWatch. And I'm sitting there by my mom's bedside in Florida, and I have a column due, and I'm thinking, like, my brain was just mush. Like, when you're sitting in a hospital room, time stops, like, you can't think about anything else but the task in front of you, and I thought, "What am I gonna write about? I need to turn something in," and I was looking around, I'm like, "I'll just write about this. This is what retirement and this is what it looks like in America these days. Somebody's gotta take care of somebody else." And so I did, and that first column was about all the information my mom had assembled for me before she went and had surgery. She had this, like, cheat sheet that she put together is one sheet of paper that was just like absolutely essential to me, that had all of her pertinent information, the healthcare insurance coverage information, her Medicare information, all her doctors, all her conditions, all her surgery, previous surgeries, all the stuff you, as a 52-year-old woman at the time, that I did not know about my mother because, like, I know all those things about my own children, but
Sure.
I didn't know them about my mother. Like, what year was my mother's appendectomy? You
Yeah.
know, who knew? I wasn't around.
Yeah.
So she had all that stuff on a piece of paper, so I wrote about that, and I heard from so many people after I wrote that column, and so each time I went through something with my mom that was significant that I thought people needed to hear about, or that if I was having a hard time with it, other people were having a hard time with it, and so I started to write about these. I had the spine of a narrative starting with those columns, and then my mom got really sick, and she went home on hospice, and we had about 9 months of ups and downs, and then she passed away, and then I couldn't write any more columns because I couldn't face writing about that. I had been writing about her illness for a length of time, and then it was like, "Okay, now I'm gonna have to, if I write about this again, I'm gonna have to write a sentence that's like, 'I'm sorry to have to tell you, but my mom has passed away,' and I couldn't do it."
Yeah. I think that that's such a common emotion for so many of us where we're sort of identified in some ways as a de facto caregiver, whether it's financial or otherwise, and filling people in or even admitting to ourselves that that part of our life is over. But going back to what you said about creating the spine of this book, the infrastructure of this book with each of your articles. And for those of us who are devotees of your work, it's pretty easy to see how you came up with a book from all of the subject matters that you really were able to attack and then translate for the rest of us trying to make our way through. And I think what's so unique about this book, Beth, is that you were a caregiver for your mom, for her physical being and her daughter and her advocate, but you really talked about, and this book really became caregiving in a financial sense.
Right.
And I think that that's really unique about your book. I don't think that there's another book on the market that provides this depth of exploratory and explanatory information into someone else's finances. We all play roles. We're the daughter or the niece or the next door neighbor who loves your elderly neighbor and trying to look out. So when you think about that list that your mom started with, is that where most of us in the middle, in the sandwich generation, is that where we should begin with our aging parents, asking them to start?
Well, I think it actually starts a little bit earlier than that, because what we needed most of all, and this was like the second column I wrote, was the power of attorney and the healthcare proxy. And a lot of people skip over this. And I think it is the caregiver's motive. Like, the caregiver should be the one motivated to get this done. And what I've been telling people to do, and what I did, was as soon as my father died, I said to my mother, "You need to take care of a few things for me, because now I'm responsible for you."
Yeah,
Right? When my mom and dad were both alive, they were responsible for each other.
right.
But when my father died, my mom became my responsibility. If something happened to my mother, they're gonna make a phone call. Somebody's gonna make a phone call, and that phone call is gonna come to me. And not just because I'm the daughter, although that is usually what happens in American families these days, or families everywhere, I think, is the core. I mean, some families have multiple daughters and some families don't have daughters at all. But there's always somebody in the next generation, in the caregiving generation, who is the doer, the person who gets stuff done, the person who assigns the dishes at Thanksgiving, the person who tells everybody what to bring or where to go for the holidays,
So
like
true.
the plans of vacations, and that makes the phone calls and connects everybody. There's always that person, no matter what gender they are in the family, who is the doer. It just happens that in many families that that is a daughter, and it's often the eldest daughter. I happen to be the only daughter in the family, and I have a brother, but I'm the one that gets stuff done. And this is financial stuff is my expertise anyway. So if my mom needed facts about Abraham Lincoln while she was sick, my brother would have been fantastic at that.
Yeah, I wonder so that's interesting, but I wonder what he does, but
He's
going
a
into
college professor who
well,
studies
that
Abraham
okay,
Lincoln. Like, go find a
appropriate.
practical application for that in a caregiving scenario. So I can handle bills. That's what I'm good at. So I want caregivers out there or potential caregivers, the doers in the family, to like email everybody that they are responsible for and say, if you want me to be able to help you, I need these 2 documents. I need a power of attorney and a healthcare proxy. And I know in your business, you would never do a plan for somebody or plan for a family that did not include those 2 documents. But there are people out there practicing estate planning who will do a will for you and won't and you come out of the process and you don't have those 2 documents. I don't understand how that happens. And also people go to their financial planners and their financial planners say, you should have a trust, you should have a will, you should have all these things. And they leave out the power of attorney and the healthcare proxy. And it's not like a standard part of the package that you're necessarily getting. And to me, the caregiver is the one under deadline, right? If somebody dies and you don't have these documents, they're already dead, and you've got all the time in the universe to settle everything. But
Yes.
when somebody's sick, everything's on a deadline. Their mortgage still needs to be paid. Their electric bill still needs to be paid. That you need to keep up on their life insurance and their long-term care policy and all of these things, and everything's on a deadline. If you don't have the right paperwork, you're like hitting a brick wall.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up, Beth. As an estate planning attorney by trade, my first place is documents, and I know that that's not everybody's first place, but as you point out, and for those who are unfamiliar with what those documents are, a healthcare proxy and a power of attorney are part of a category of documents called advanced directives. And the reason why they call them advanced directives is because it's your directive to say who's in charge in advance of your incapacity. So, a healthcare proxy is exactly what it sounds. Some states call it a healthcare power of attorney. There are other states who only have living wills, but in essence, they're the same thing. It's appointing a person to speak for you in the event that you cannot articulate your wishes in a healthcare setting. And a power of attorney is similar. You're appointing a person to make financial decisions for you. So that's your person in the finance world, and the healthcare proxy or your healthcare power of attorney is your person in the healthcare world. And I think one of the things that you said is really important, Beth, because you talked about when the first spouse passed away. And I think you're right. I think that kids think about these things, or sandwich generation members, if you will, think about these things almost a step too late. You thinking about it and you having that direct conversation with your mom when your dad passed away was so smart, and it probably set you up for such success. But being a daughter and being a writer and being somebody who's pragmatic, how do you start that conversation in a family that maybe doesn't talk about such things for all sorts of reasons? What's your best advice to our listeners to have that conversation after something happens to the first spouse?
My best advice to people is to ask your parents for their advice because I found that the one universal thing about the older generation is that they like for people to ask their opinion on things or to ask for their help. And you get a lot further with older people if you ask them for their help. For instance, when my father died, slightly before that, I had gotten my own estate plan done. And I named my mother as the executor, the trustee, all of those things for me. So I had to go to her and say, "Hey, I'm filling out all these papers. I just got divorced, and I don't want to name my ex-husband as the trustee on any of these documents. I want to name you. What do you think about that? Can you take care of that for me?" And, what's been your experience with this? Have you ever done this for anybody else? And we had that conversation because I made it about her helping me. And so when it came time when my father died shortly after that, I was like, "Okay, you know how you did that for me? I wanna be able to do that for you. You have all these documents you're gonna have to fill out, just like me as a divorced person, suddenly single in the legal universe. You are suddenly single in the legal universe. You have to do the same thing that I just did. So, what are you gonna do about it?" And it made that conversation go better because I asked her first to help me before I offered my help to her.
I love that because I think what you did was symbolize your action symbolized that you appreciated her and respected her input, and you weren't trying to take control away. And I think that oftentimes the conversations with aging loved ones can go awry because the conversation can sort of devolve, if you will, into sort of an accusatory situation saying that you don't have the ability to do this anymore and I need to take that from you. So I love that, Beth, that you reframed it and sought that advice from your mom. So even for those out there who necessarily might not appoint their parent as their agent under a healthcare proxy or a power of attorney, seeking their advice on appointing someone, I think is a really beautiful way to
Yeah.
do it. And once you have those documents in place, Beth, you've had the first conversation with mom or dad or your aging loved one, you have that requisite authority. What should the adult children do next? How do they get into the nitty-gritty of the finances without having a parent feel like you're interfering or prying, especially when it comes to money?
It can be difficult. Think about it in terms of the conversation you have to have when a parent should no longer be driving,
Mm.
taking away the car keys. I like to if you can baby step it a little bit, the analogy I like to use is that all of this financial documentation, the power of attorney for financial stuff, and also the healthcare proxy are like having a spare key to the car or a spare key to the house. Like
Love that.
you would never expect your neighbor who has your spare key for emergencies to come over and let themselves in at 3 o'clock in the morning to make a cup of coffee uninvited, right? That key is there in case you get locked out. And so really the financial powers that you give somebody for emergency purposes should really just be for emergencies. They shouldn't be you shouldn't necessarily need a family member right away to come in and take over, because then, like, you're obviously getting to it too late, right? Like,
Yeah.
you should have those documents in place for emergency purposes from the time a person is 18 years old. Like, I have a power of attorney for my son who's 19, and we did it as soon as he turned 18. Like, this is just something an adult human being needs to have on hand in case of emergencies. And so if you normalize it so that it's just there in case you need it, then you've already taken one little baby step. And then when an emergency happens, usually there's some sort of mistake that's happened, right? In my book, I have various examples. In one family, the mom forgot to take her required minimum distribution one year because she's having some cognitive problems. And so her son, and it's a big mess if you forget to take your required
Yeah, sure
minimum
is.
distribution. There are penalties, you have to fill out paperwork, and you want to make sure it doesn't happen again. So her son was able to step in and say, "Hey, mom, do you want some help with this? I can help you. I'm good at this stuff." Other families, it's taxes. In other families, it's a scam situation. You realize that the adult family member is somehow giving away money or getting money scammed from them, and they need to have more limited access to their phone or to their account disbursements. Like, you need to step in and say, "Hey, you just almost lost, hopefully, $10,000. Let's try to see what we can do to make sure that doesn't happen again." And sometimes taking away a phone is like taking away the car keys. If a parent is getting in trouble because they have access to their phone and they're answering scam phone calls or they're making transactions on their phone, they're clicking on links that they shouldn't, you know, it might be time to talk about taking away the phone.
So let's talk about that a little bit because I did recently have a cybersecurity expert on one of the past episodes. And when these scams that sort of seep into our aging loved ones' lives are so sophisticated, what is your best advice to those sandwich generation members out there that are looking to shield their parents from falling victim to things like that without taking away their car keys slash phones or freedom? Do you have
I
any advice?
Yeah, no, I recently had to talk a family member out of a scam as it was happening. Like,
Oh,
he was
wow.
on his phone with the scammers, and I called on his wife's phone, and I'm like, "Put them on hold and talk to me." And he was literally convinced. He was dressed and ready to go to the bank and take out cash. The best way to forestall that is to be a trusted contact on certain accounts, like a brokerage account, life insurance, that sort of account, where somebody at the institution can call you if there are the known red flags. If my relative had gone over to the bank and tried to withdraw $40,000 in cash, some teller over at the bank should be trained enough to say, why is this ill 80-year-old man trying to take out a large amount of cash? Something is wrong. And if they see a trusted contact on the account, they will call that trusted contact and say, "Your loved one is here, doesn't look well, and they're trying to take out money in cash." The brokerages in particular are trained to listen to people's voices on phone calls and say, if they're asking for money in untraceable denominations of some kind, gift cards, money wire transfers, stuff that can't be pulled back in cases of fraud, they're supposed to call the trusted contact if there is one.
And so you can add a trusted contact to any account, right, Beth?
Really, any account. On a bank account, if you are the power of attorney on record with the bank account, it acts in the same way. But you can also then look in on the bank account where the daily transactions are taking place. And you can have the bank app on your phone and you can check what that parent is up to. It's a little bit like spying. It feels like it, but think about it from the sandwich generation, reverse parenting perspective. Like, I would never hand my 19-year-old a credit card without teaching him how to use it first, right? And
Yeah.
so the way you start out as a parent doing that is you have them as an authorized user on your credit card, and then you see what purchases they're making. Then they get their own credit card where you might be a joint signer on the credit card, and you look over their bills with them and you make sure that they're spending responsibly. Same thing in reverse. When somebody's 80 and they're experiencing a little bit of cognitive decline because everybody is at 80, you wanna keep an eye on things. Like, you don't have to interfere if nothing is going wrong, but you can sort of spot check. With my own mom, when I went to look at her bills and her statements and stuff like that, I saw that she was giving away a lot of money to political causes of her political denomination. And she was on every mailing list, and she literally whoever asked her for money, she just gave them money, and it wasn't a great amount of money to each person. It's not like she was giving away thousands and tens of thousands of dollars at a time. Whoever asked her got $25, $50, and it just added up to a bigger number that I'm sure she was calculating in her head.
Right.
And, the solicitations were just endless. She had obviously triggered some mechanism in the system that just constantly asked her for money, and she gave it, and I thought, "There's something going wrong here, and I have to help her moderate her impulse control,
Yeah,
in
yeah.
some way."
And so seeing a change in spending, for example, is definitely something that people should look out for in terms of a red flag. Delaying on things like your required minimum distributions that could have pretty significant financial consequences if you don't comply. What are the other red flags, Beth, as a sandwich generation member from a financial perspective that we should look out for with our aging parents?
Past due bills or just the inability to manage incoming and outgoing correspondence. Had been showing warning signs before her surgery that we didn't know anything about. And the biggest one was that she was in the middle of a long-term care insurance claim, right? So she had the home health aid that was paid for through the long-term care insurance, but she had to file receipts for that. And the receipt filing process was like the most tedious and onerous thing I've ever encountered in my entire life. And I don't blame her for not being able to keep up on it,
Yeah.
but she wasn't telling us that she wasn't doing it. And so with a long-term care claim in her particular circumstance, if you lapse the paperwork for 90 days, you went out of claim. So when you
Wow.
go out of claim, the consequence is that you then owe them a premium. Because when you're in claim, when you're getting money from them, they don't expect you to pay them the premiums, and these premiums are pretty steep,
Yeah.
right? And one of the benefits of being in the middle of a claim is that you don't owe them any money, they owe you money. But she had stopped filling out the paperwork. So suddenly when I got to her desk after her surgery, there was a past due notice from the long-term care, and it was for almost $7,000,
Wow.
that needed to be sent, like, immediately. They were very upset with this process, and there was a trusted contact, and they had reached out to us. It all happened simultaneously. So at some point, we would have been notified like that week, but we found out about it that week anyway. And so the average amount that a caregiver spends out of pocket per year, according to AARP, is about $7,200. So in the first 3 weeks of taking care of my mom, I had to send out a check for 6,800. And then if you consider my flight down there, that was my second flight down there. So two flights, Ubers, you know,
Meals, yeah.
all of it.
Yeah.
I was over the yearly average in a month of out-of-pocket spending. Now, I was gonna get that money back eventually, but I had to write a check, and, like, I don't keep that much money around in my checking account on a normal basis, and I have my own expenses and my own inflows and outflows, and it was hard for me to put my hands on an extra 7 grand on a moment's notice, but I had to FedEx a check the next day. And of course, the money came back to me like 4 months later, and it wasn't FedEx to me, it was regular
Of
mail.
course not, of course
Uh,
not.
but, you know, this is what a caregiver has to do, and, like, sandwich generation, like, I've got kids, I've got household expenses, I've got my own life, and it's hard to juggle that sort of thing going on, and
Yeah.
that's to me what, like, the sandwich generation pressures came mostly financially from that sort of thing, where I had to put my time and my own money on the table when that money and time was needed elsewhere as well,
Yeah.
both for my job and my life and my kids, you know.
And you bring up an important point, Beth, in that we can't do it all. And there is sort of a day of reckoning where you feel it, or many days of reckoning. And so you talk about your brother not necessarily being the doer in this situation. How do you recommend a sibling like you when you're the doer? How do you go to your sibling and ask for help in a way that they actually wanna provide it? What's your best advice for getting that extra assistance from a sibling or someone else in the family to help you carry the load?
Yeah, it really requires communication, and I know that some families are not good about that. My brother's very private and doesn't like to be brought into things, so I left him out of the story mostly on purpose. But we worked out, a schedule that worked for both of us. I had a remote friendly job and he doesn't. But we worked out a schedule so that he could go to visit my mom at the times when he was available, and I could go when he we just worked out a leapfrog schedule. So we were never there at the same time because that would have created redundancies. But he was there as much as I was there, and we were able to communicate well enough with each other to make that happen. And the thing about a lot of siblings is, for a lot of people, there's one sibling in proximity and one sibling who has moved away. And the sibling in proximity gets stuck with a lot of the daily tasks. And sometimes there's a sibling that has money and a sibling that's nearby, and they're not the same person. And then so the sibling who has money feels like the family ATM. Like everybody's always getting money from that person. And whenever there's an emergency, they turn to that person, and that person then feels a little alienated that they're only good for whatever they can pay for. And it's difficult. The only way through any of these things is communication and the knowledge. One of the things I was trying to do with my book is tell people when they had an obligation and didn't have an obligation,
Oh,
right? So
that's
there's
important.
no obligation legally or financially to support your aging parent. You are not on the hook for any of this. You're not on the hook for their credit card debts. You're not on the hook for paying for their medical care. You are not required to pay for a fancy nursing home. You can outsource a lot of the hands-on physical care. The thing is that when it comes to having that trusted person, that trusted contact, the name you're going to put on all those documents, it's hard to get out of that one.
Yeah.
I don't know, like, how many times have you seen it in your practice that they put some random third-party stranger? It's rare,
It
right?
is rare. It is rare. I think you bring up an important point, particularly with the siblings and the communication part. I think in every family we play a role, fortunately or unfortunately. And whether that role is a financial support and that's what you're known for, or you're the doer, I think it's really hard to break out of those roles. What I found in my practice, particularly asking for help with siblings, is be specific in the request and share the fact that you can't do it all. You're also raising kids. In your case, you were a full time writer and a parent, a single parent. And so you had to have your brother pitch in, and I'm thrilled to hear that he did. I think in some families, it's incredibly difficult to cross that bridge, particularly if siblings have been reluctant. And that's why really asking specifically for the things that you need and maybe finding the skill that they're good at. And that could be doing long distance bookkeeping and being the person in charge of making sure bills are paid. So thinking outside the box. And before I let you go, Beth, one of the things that I liked so much about your book that I think is a really important distinction that is lost on a lot of people, even well meaning people. You called your book My Mother's Money. And I think that for those of us in this space, one of the hardest things to get through to many family members is that it's not your money, it's your mother's money. And so, what is your best advice for those of us who perhaps would not have made the same choices that our parents did from a financial perspective and finding a way to respect their choices while still caring for them in the best possible way and respecting their agency?
Yeah, it's really hard. It's a really weird feeling, and having gone through it, I don't have all the answers to the emotional part of it because I'm still sorting through all of that now that, whatever was left of my mom's money became my money.
Yeah.
And that still feels weird to me because especially because my mom was relatively young for an old person when she died. And I would rather have had her around to spend that money herself than have it for me or to send my kids to college or whatever. But my mom had been careful about her finances for her whole life. And so when I took over managing her daily ins and outs, I wanted to respect that. It was important to me to take care of things the way that she w- took care of things herself. But I broke the rules a lot. My mom didn't believe in online banking like many older people. And there was just no way I could function without online banking. So I
Yeah.
just did it and hoped that she wasn't mad at me. But there were things that I spent money on that I know that she would not have spent money on and that she was worried about spending money on, and she was worried about the money running out constantly, and I think a lot of people have that fear, and that fear goes both ways. Because I understood the mechanics of the money, I knew how long the money would last
Right.
because I was able to run those numbers, and I think there's a whole section of my book about how to figure that part out, and I think that if people had a more realistic understanding of the financial picture, that they would make better choices that would make everybody happier. There would be less emergency selling of houses and moving to lesser facilities or getting less help. I think there would be better care for people if people were felt free to spend the money and weren't afraid that it was going to run out. Because in these circumstances, when somebody is sick, you have to make the money last for less time. And I think that's a reality that some people don't want to face when they're going through it. But I knew my mom's money was going to last long enough for her because she was really sick. And the reality is that I wasn't planning for 20 years. I
Mm.
was planning for 6 months.
Yeah.
And so I knew that we could have whatever she needed, even though she was saying, like, "We can't afford all these caregivers. We can't afford for me to stay in this facility." And I was like, "No, we can.
Yeah.
What are you saving the money for? That's what this money is for."
Yeah.
And I think if people understood the greater financial picture and were able to run the numbers and got some help with that when they needed it, that the caregiving would be better and everybody's needs would be better suited because people wouldn't be so afraid of running out.
And that's why everyone should buy Beth's book because she has really provided all of us with the guide that we need to figure out how to best advocate for our parents from a financial perspective, which leads to all of it, the best care and how to make sure that as we age, our loved ones are cared for. I think the other thing, Beth, that you've done really well is you have 2 kids and you've done an incredible job of modeling for them how best to advocate and to take care. So bravo to you on that. And really, your book is truly the resource that so many of us need. We will have in our show notes how to get it, but it's available at your local bookstore, on Amazon, and any online platform where you buy your books. So thank you so much, Beth, for joining us today.
Thank you. It was great to be here.
Thanks. Don't forget to subscribe to the Sandwich Generation Survival Guide. A new episode drops each month. And if you're enjoying it, please don't forget to leave me a 5-star review and share with your fellow Sandwich Generation members. For a complete listing of past podcast episodes, you can check out any podcast platform, or you can head to my website at www.sandwichgenerationlaw.com. Thanks for listening.